Now that we started assembling the engine, I want to finish it and start it. So I might do a little bit more than just Thursdays. I want the video will she start to be as soon as possible, so we're gonna work on that. Okay, so now we can install the cover here. For this reason, we have to remove this bolt that we put temporarily before to hold our plate in place, but it actually holds the cover as well, so we're taking it out. So here, I know that I mentioned that, but I got lost in my footage. I don't know when I mentioned it, so I'm just gonna say it again. These two bolts here go into the ceiling block, which is aluminium or aluminum. That's why they are these what they call cheese-headed screws. So you can only tighten them with a screwdriver, and eventually you're not going to be able to over torque them. This one is going into the ceiling block as well. So for this one, we're going to use another one of these, and we have 5 of these now, but the other 4 are short. The longer one we're going to use here, but it's not too long because this hole is a blind hole. And sometimes people here use a bolt which is too long and it bottoms out into the blind hole before it's tight. They keep tightening it with the ratchet and they just ruin the threads on the ceiling block. That's why even if you use a bolt with a hex head, still you have to be careful how much you tighten, and you have to be careful not to use a too long bolt, but not too short, because if we use one of these, by the time it goes through the plate, there's going to be only 3-4 threads available here to go into the ceiling block. That's why we're going to use the longer one, but not too long. So this one is going to come here, and these 4 go on this side. I don't know if you see right here on the plate, because these holes are actually threaded. That's why you need only a short screw, and it's again cheese-headed screw, so you can use a flat head screwdriver and not over torque it. I've seen many engines. I don't know if on the later engines they decided to go with non-threaded holes and just a little bit bigger, so your bolt goes through and you put a nut in the back. Maybe it's a better option, but for now I'm just gonna use it as original, and if I see any leaks here, I'm just gonna replace those and put a nut in the back. Nothing wrong with that. We can always do that later. Another thing here that I wanted to mention is that the manual doesn't tell you anything about that, but this hole, for example, is through. And this one not, but this one and this one are through. And everything else is blind hole. This one is blind, this one is blind, this one is blind. So for these 3 holes that are through, on the previous engine that I rebuilt, TR6 engine, I used copper washers, even though the manual doesn't tell you anything about that. But I just used copper washers because this is going into the crankcase. This one goes into the gallery here where the push rod goes up and down. This time I'm not going to use copper washers. I'm going to use thread sealant on these. Thread sealant by Permatex. I'm still waiting for them to sponsor me. And of course, for the gasket, we're going to use my favorite aviation forma gasket by Permatex. And of course, we're going to apply it on this surface, on the surface of the cover, and on both sides of the gasket. So I'm not going to hold you here for that. I might play some nice music for you and put you on time lapse, because this is a time-taking process. The only thing that you need to be worried about is this tensioner. When you're installing it, it needs to go, of course, on this side of the chain, because I've seen a tensioner when I took apart the engine, another engine, the tensioner was installed like that. So it doesn't do much there. It needs to be there. So anyways, I'm gonna play some nice music for you, and I'm gonna put you on time-lapse mode, and I'm gonna do that on my own here. Alright, so the cover is installed, all the bolts and screws and everything is in place, and now we're gonna just torque them. And the torque here is 14 to 16 foot-pounds, I believe, so very little. And of course this, we're gonna tighten as much as we can, because there's no other way. Well, there is a way, but I don't want to cheat with. Okay, that's it. So now we can install this sleeve here, and I'm gonna put a little bit of assembly lube because I don't want it to go dry on the seal. Again, you have a tapered end or beveled, and that's how it goes, with the beveled end towards the inside. And I believe that the only reason for this is so it can go easy through the seal. So we need to match the key, which is somewhere here, right? Come on. Now it's slippery and I can't. Okay. Okay, and it goes in as far as it can go. Yeah, and since we're here, let's install everything that belongs to the front end. So let's install the front pulley with the harmonic balancer. So apparently the harmonic balancer is this ring that goes over the pulley. So this and these are two separate parts. And the only thing that holds this ring in place is this rubber. And this assembly actually is flexible. So we're not going to go deep into that, but I just want to show you the rubber here. It has very little cracks here and there. And I believe that some cracks on the outside are not significant because that's just the surface. This here is exposed to oil, to fuel, to heat, but inside it's different. I'm not going to do anything about it. I'm not going to go crazy. I'm just going to install it. So now we have to match again the key. Okay. There once was a ship that put to sea. The name of the ship was a belly of tea. If you remember here, when I was painting it, I screwed it up here a little bit, but I never fixed it. But here, this is where the fan goes, so I'm not really worried about this. So this is the boat. And I'm just going to install it here, but we're going to torque it later because I don't want to block the crankshaft to be able to torque it. I'm just going to do it with the transmission later, or we're going to figure another way. For now, I'm just going to put it here so it holds my pulley in place. And that's it. The front end is assembled. All right, it's a few days later. We're in the shop with Rusty. Rusty's helping me today. And the engine is pretty much assembled. We have some of the distributor here and stuff that we can install. But I'd like to put the head on because I don't want my cylinders to stay open for that long. So the head is painted. I painted it the other day. And now we can start getting ready for assembling it. So here we have the new valves. On the head we already have the new valve guides and hardened seats on the exhaust. So that's easy. But here we have the rocker shaft with all the rockers. And for some reason, when I took it apart, I inspected the shaft and I determined that I need to get a new shaft, and I did, but I didn't pay attention to the rockers somehow. And look at all the faces. Like some of them here, I don't know if you can see very well, but here, this one catches my fingernail. This one is not too bad. This one is not too bad, but some of them are pretty bad. So the thing is, if I order them now, it's gonna take a week or so for them to come. So yesterday I was thinking of making a simple jig to reface them myself here in the garage. And I looked at some videos, but there's an easy way to do it. Somebody uses this method, but there's no way to control the radius this way, and I don't like that idea. And to make it in a way that you can control the radius, it's becoming way too complicated and more efficient if you buy new ones. But what do we do now? I don't want to wait for new ones. Oh, look at that. We have Chef Tash's head here. Maybe we can steal some of his rockers. He's never gonna find out. All right, just kidding you. That's not David. He would never leave it here with me. He doesn't trust me. So here we have a lot more that also are not great, some of them, but between these and these, we might be able to collect 12 good ones. And when I say 12, I mean 6 and 6, because they are odd and even, right? You see, 1, 3, 5, 7 are in one direction, and then 2, 4, 6 are in the other direction. They point towards the center of the cylinder, all of them. So we need to really find 6 plus 6. I also came to the Most Motors website to look at the rockers to see how much they are, and it turns out that these rockers are used also for MG Midget, Austin Healey Sprite, for Spitfire, so they're all the same. And for Spitfire especially, they're for all Spitfires from Mark 1 to 1500. So I even have a Spitfire spare engine that I can steal some from if I have to. The problem is this Spitfire is under that pile of snow, so I don't want to go there. Anyways, let's start by taking them apart. We're gonna take them both apart, I guess. But before that, I want to just make sure that I can remember how to put it back together. So here, unlike the TR4 rocker shaft that we replaced recently, we have also some spacers in some places. You see here we have a spacer between the rocker and the pedestal. Here we have one as well, but here and here we don't have. So we need to remember where we have, because usually what I do is I take out from the old shaft and I put directly to the new one, or I put everything on a long brake line, for example, just so everything is in order. But here we're gonna make a mess. We're gonna have two taken apart, so it's gonna be hard to remember. So what I observe here is that here at the end and here we have spring. It's like a spiral washer. Then the next pedestals we have spacers on the outside, and on the next pedestals we have spacers on the inside. So that's how we're going to remember it. On the outer ones we have spacer on the outside, on the inner ones we have spacers on the inside. So I'm going to take them apart. Some of the pedestals many times are really hard to take apart, but these ones, surprisingly, they all spin. Normally they get seized there. Like, oh, okay, this one is seized. This one is held by the screw here. This screw, we're going to talk about it later. Anyways, I'm going to put you on time-lapse mode because that's sometimes it takes forever to take apart, and we're going to go from there. Alright, so they're both apart, and that was actually surprisingly easy. I mean, easier than expected. This one, the old crusty one, which is actually TR6. I don't know if I mentioned, but it is a TR6. This one came a little bit harder, but because it was super dry. This one still had oil on it, so it was pretty easy to take apart. And surprisingly, both of them are not super bad. I mean, especially in the front end, many times they get like really worn, but these ones, both of them, are not super worn. I don't know how come. Like this one here is worn. This one is the worst here, and that's surprisingly the one that's close to the oil feed. So it looks like all the oil that was coming through the hole was going forward and wasn't coming here to the back, I guess. I don't know. So, but I took it apart, and this one I didn't keep in order because this is going to be just for spare parts. These are the spare ones. This one I kept pretty much in order, and this shaft the same. That's the GT6 shaft. It has a little bit of wear here and there, but it's not super bad, which tells me that this engine had good oil pressure and the oil was reaching to the shaft as well. So that's good. We're going to change it anyways. We have a new one, but let's see the rockers now. So when I look at them, this is a GT6 one, and I can't really say how bad it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a piece of 600 sandpaper and I'm just going to drag it a few times back and forth. It's not going to take any material away. It's just going to polish the end and it's going to show me where it touches and where it doesn't. I'm going to use a flat surface here. So I'm going to go. I can't take any metal off, right? With 600 sandpaper. Okay, now you can see where is it? Okay, now you can see here that this is pretty bad. This is a low spot here. So I'm gonna go through all of them and polish them and see how bad they are, and I'm just gonna pick and choose between them. So this one, we're gonna say it's bad. The good ones are gonna go higher, the bad ones are gonna go lower. So there were some that I thought were good. For example, this one. Let's see how good this one is. So that's what it looks like before it's polished. It almost looks like there's no problem with it, right? So let's see if it is gonna polish the whole surface or not. Yeah, this one is pretty good. It has very little dot here where it doesn't touch, but for this much, I'm gonna consider it good. Again, I'm not trying to fix the bad ones. I'm just determining which ones are good and which ones are bad. Yeah, this one is bad for sure. There's nothing we can do about this one without grinding it. So, goes down. Okay, I'm gonna go through all of them now. I'm not gonna hold you here. The good ones are gonna go up, the bad ones are gonna go down, and then we're gonna see if we can get some good ones from here. All right, so I have some good news and some even gooder news. I know that's not a word. Betterer is the right word. Yeah, so the good news is that most of them actually were not that bad. Well, I shouldn't say most, because 2, 4, 6. So 6 of them were good. And then the second row is the original ones that are bad. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, these are bad. But then the other good news is that in the spare ones, I managed to find 6 to replace them. And that was actually on the verge, because these ones here, these are the rest of the spare ones, look, they're all pretty nasty. They're all pretty nasty, pretty bad. And I didn't even try to polish these because I knew that they weren't going to come back. Maybe they were, I don't know. These two, I tried, I polished, and look, they are obviously not coming back. So these are the old ones. But it turns out that my judgment when I initially look at them is totally wrong, because like all of them looked bad. I wasn't even sure if I was gonna able to save one. And look, I managed to not to save, just polish them, and 6 of them turned out to be perfectly fine. This one, just good. But some of them, of course, like this one, I couldn't save. I tried, I polished it a little bit, and it is clear that it's not touching there in the middle. So for this one though, I managed to find another one from the spare ones. Again, some of them have some marks here and there, but it is so almost invisible. So what we're gonna do is, of course, we're gonna take these 6 away, and we're gonna replace them with these. But I don't like the nuts on some of them, of the new ones. that we're gonna replace them with, because you see they're like damaged from adjustment. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my original ones and I'm gonna put them on the 6 there. These are going to the spare now. The sandpaper with a little bit of WD-40 worked fantastic to polish them. So I'm gonna take everything apart and I'm gonna clean it in the parts cleaner. We're gonna blow through the hose here, because you see there's oil passage here, oil passage here, that we need to make sure that they're clean. Somebody advised to use a brush in oil passages, so I have some spray gun cleaning kit with some little brushes. We're gonna clean that. We're gonna inspect the bore inside, because these are not bushed. They're not like the TR4 where you have bushings here. These are just steel, so we're gonna make sure that the bore inside on all of them is good, and then we're gonna start assembling. All right, so they all cleaned up really well. The bores inside are great, and I run this little brush through all the oil passages, cleaned up the pedestals as well. So it's ready to be assembled. So we have a new shaft, and I'm just gonna show you quickly the shaft and what it does. So you see the new shaft, somebody was talking about oil escaping from the end of the shafts when I was doing the TR4 video. So the end of the shafts, they're drilled through all the way, so they're hollow inside, but then there's a screw inside with an Allen key on both sides, so they're capped. So the only way for oil to go out from the shaft is through these little holes that are under each and every rocker. But how the oil goes in is through this hole here. So that's the wrong one. So when you position the pedestal here on the right spot, now, actually the other way around. So when you position the shaft in such a way that this hole lines up with this hole here, and you run the screw, then this hole underneath lines up with this hole. Now through this hole we feed oil, it goes out from this hole at the bottom, and it feeds the shaft through here. And now from here it spreads left and right, and through these little holes here delivers oil to all the rockers. Okay, so let's start assembling from the end with the screw. All right, we put also thread lock here. So now we are all good. So let's double check. So all the rockers are pointing to the center of the cylinder. Odds are odd and evens are even. The studs are on that side of the shaft, all of them, where the adjuster screws are. And we have spring and spring here. On the outer pedestals we have the spacers on the outside, and on the inner pedestals we have the spacers on the inside. So this is ready to be installed on the head. Before I bring the head though, I'm gonna set up all my valves and valve springs, the collets or keepers, whatever you want to call them, and everything in the way that's gonna go into the head. So I just want to make sure that everything is here and it's nice and clean. I went to the parts washer and I quickly cleaned all that because it hasn't been cleaned. I have a single spring setup, and I was considering buying a TR6 setup, but then I decided that I'm not going to do it because we have the original camshaft. It's not a performance or anything, and I think single spring is more than enough for that. More tension on the valve means more tension on the tappets and on the camshaft. I don't think it's needed. I'm not going to race this car. I'm not going to go into crazy RPM. I'm installing a D-type overdrive in it. I'm guessing I'm not gonna go more than 3,500 RPM, maybe 4,000 in the worst case scenario. So anyways, these are the springs. That's what we're gonna use, the original springs. So now just to make sure that we didn't lose anything, while taking everything apart and cleaning, etc. Now we're going to arrange everything again in the way of how everything is going to be assembled. I don't know if I mentioned, but these are brand new stainless steel valves. Yeah, 1 and 250. In 1973, I believe, they switched to smaller exhaust valves for GT6 and TR6. They reduced the size to 1.195, I believe, something like that. So anyways, that's the way they're going to be assembled. Exhaust in the beginning and exhaust at the end, and the rest are in a pattern: 2 intake, 2 exhaust, 2 intake, 2 exhaust, 2 intake. The intake and the exhaust have different sets of hardware. So the bottom collar, which looks like that, is the same for all of them. So let's make sure that we have 12 of these. Now this is where things are different. For the exhaust, we have these 2-part top collars, like they go like this, one inside the other. And for the intake, we have a single part, like it's a 1-part top collar. That's intake, that's exhaust. And of course, we have 2 keepers, or 2 collets for each and every one. Okay, looks like we have everything. There you go. So now we can bring our head. So I just want to see how the valves fit, just in case, you know, they fitted them in the machine shop, but just to make sure that they don't have play. Of course, we have new valve guides, so no play, or very minimal. So let's flip the head and start assembling. So as usual, I'm going to use my homemade tool, which is basically a washer welded to a long reach clamp. And we're going to start with number 1, and we're going to go from there. So I'm going to clean the valve really nice. Of course, we're going to put a little bit of assembly lube on it. We don't want it to run dry in the guide. I'm going to put it inside. Then we're going to put our bottom collar, spring, the top collar, which for the exhaust is the 2 parts like we said. I'm going to prepare my collets here, and then we're going to reach underneath. Press. Come on. There you go. Okay. So here, last time I assembled the head, I got a lot of criticism for not doing this, so I'm going to do it here. I'm going to take a rubber mallet. I don't think it's a big deal. I mean, it's obviously everything is seated properly here, but whatever. I used to do that before with a socket like this because I didn't want to hit the valve directly, but that led to disassembling it a few times, so I don't do that anymore. But apparently this is what you should do. You should tap directly on the valve a few times to make sure that everything sits properly. So I hope you're happy now. So let's do one zoomed in. Again, the bottom collar, spring. Here the top collar is the single one. There you go. Again, a smack. Good. And that's it. Now I'm going to do the other 10 quickly. Alright guys, so I think we had enough for one episode, and we're gonna continue in the next one, in which we're gonna be installing the head on the block, the rocker shaft, adjusting the valves, etc., etc. So stay tuned for that. We are fast approaching the time when we're gonna install the engine on the frame, and we're gonna attempt to start it. I'm looking forward to that, and I'm sure you are too. So for now, thanks for watching, commenting, subscribing, sharing, and supporting the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.